Try it again.
Taia. Why are you hitting a D?
Taia.
Laria.
No, it's going to be Daia. Daia. Make more of a D sound.
Daia. That's not a D. It's either a T or an L.
Well, it's somewhere in there. Let me try. Daia. Daia. Diamond? Nope.
Right. That's what I said. Oops. Tire.
You're just going to go for it?
Tire. Because it could be wheel. No, that's it. It's tire.
So how do you say it?
You say it.
타이어,
Taia. Isn't that what we said?
타이어,
Taia.
I.
Taia.
E. Yo.
That's what we said. Taia.
Oh.
타이어.
Hello, everybody.
Taia.
Here we are with
Taia.
episode 6 of Denise and Galen go to Korea, and this is about not getting lost in translation. And so, first of all, before we came here, we tried to learn some Korean by using Duolingo and made some progress in the alphabet. We found its attempts to give us phrases wasn't super helpful because we never really figured out why we would need to get some rabbit milk and other kind of random phrases like that. And since we've gone here, we've tried to learn some Korean, taking a class, which we'll talk about in a minute. But actually, Denise has had most of the experience trying to get along, not actually speaking any Korean, and also not having any ability to translate.
So I've been heading to our two favorite local grocery stores where, again, American with white hair, everybody knows me the minute I walk in. And I found a few people who are very helpful who will take their phones and do some translating for me, but there's a lot of pointing and acting out. The corn and the fruit guys who are on the corner, who I've passed many times before I actually bought something, always say hello, and they were very excited when I finally bought some corn, which looked like corn and smelled like corn, and they cooked it like corn, but it was like excessively chewy and not really very sweet. But I threw it in a soup.
And it was perfectly good that way.
It was perfectly good that way. But the fruit guy next to him, I bought quite a few things from. And the other night when Galen and I went by and bought some grapes, which, as I told you before, you have to buy a giant bowl of them, so you already have too much of whatever fruit you're buying. He insisted upon throwing in an extra big cluster of grapes because I'm such a good customer.
Which shows that we've been getting along just fine, not knowing hardly any words, although we picked up hello and thank you, 안녕하세요 and 감사합니다. Other than that, we're totally staggering along. Don't even know the numbers. So we're very much into holding up the finger
So the other night we went out for chicken and beer, which is a thing for sure. And some gentlemen in our age range approached us and spoke their one English word, hello. And then we're so happy when we wanted to engage in conversation with them. The first guy immediately pointed to himself and said, 62, and then pointed to me and I'm like, okay. In the United States, the first thing you would ask somebody is not how old they are. But I said I was 67, which of course put me as his elder, and therefore he was very respectful of me, and I got a lot of bows and even a free beer eventually.
Yeah, that was a lot of fun. Those are very friendly people. Kind of an example of, even though we can't really interact with people other than in the pointing and finger shake showing and a little bit of using the Google Translator, at that level things have been easy and sometimes fun just trying to get along that way.
Yeah.
We do depend on our friend Nick and his wife, who he speaks Korean. He says not fluently, but from my point of view, he's been able to manage all our
Seems pretty
situations.
good.
So
Yeah.
he's the one and his wife who took us to get the exciting various meals that we've had, which we're still saving up for our food episode.
Might have to be multiple
like a
foods.
4-part series or something like that. But another kind of metaphor for me of the whole translation experience is that a lot of what we do on a daily basis is similar but different to what we're used to. Like, for example, Denise's, you don't ask somebody how old you are, but apparently that's actually one of the first questions you ask somebody when you meet somebody new in Korean culture. And so, just all the little things about daily interaction that we have to translate from this is how we're used to doing it. Like, people know that you bow, don't shake hands here. And for an American, that whole thing seems weird. But once you get used to that kind of interaction, it's just slowly becomes just normal to nod your head or whatever seems to be appropriate with people because that's how they're interacting with us.
Yeah, I'm all in on the bows for sure. We bow before, during, and after the aerobics class that I take.
Yeah. And in our Korean class, where our teacher doesn't speak English, much, hardly at all, not much more English than we speak Korean. There's also a lot of signing and writing and using of the translator. So my goal is to be able to ask for something with the appropriate number, and maybe we can get to where's the restroom and the kind of usual tourist phrases.
How much is that?
How much is that? Yeah, even those we haven't gotten to yet, but I think by the end of 2 years we should be at that point.
I will say that when we look like tourists that are struggling, like we have our phone out, like in the old days when you had your map out, that almost always somebody will stop and ask if they can help us, and they do help us. So people are kind.
Yeah, and the last little kind of metaphor story here is the Cuban-Korean jazz band that we heard, which to me is like the perfect symbol of the whole idea here. These young people who obviously learned to be good musicians, probably in a music school, and for whatever reason fell in love with Korean music, or at least decided that was a way to get a gig. And so they have a full set of very traditional Korean music played more or less like one would have heard in Havana. And
Cuban
the pianist,
music, he means.
What did I say?
Korean.
Not Korean. Korean people playing Cuban music.
Yeah.
Pianist was really good.
So
Definitely
good.
would have fooled me as a Cuban trained Cuban musician.
And she had been to Cuba.
Yeah.
She was the only one who had in the band. We talked to him for a little while during the break.
So I think that's it for this episode. Galen's going to do a little more teacher musing if you want to stick around. Thanks a lot, everybody. Well, thank you for sticking around to hear Galen doing some more teacher musing. My still yet unarticulated thesis, but very tied to some recent events that people have been communicating with me about, is the coverage of the teacher protests sparked in part by the presumed suicide of an elementary school teacher. I think he's a kindergarten teacher, new young teacher who, at least according to the story, killed herself because the parental pressure and accusations directed at her were so upsetting and disturbing to her that she decided to kill herself. I don't know if that's the truth, but that's what's reported in the newspaper. And there's definitely a concern here on the teacher side that there's been this pendulum swing, I guess, in that used to be the case, and I talked to teachers who were here even just 10 or 15 years ago, where corporal punishment was seen as normal and acceptable, part of the culture. That's not unique to Korea at all. There's still states in the United States where corporal punishment is permitted, and every once in a while there'll be some legislator who thinks we need to bring back corporal punishment to get the kids to behave. And the pendulum swing here sort of has been to the idea that what they call school violence is an endemic problem we have to address. And it's sort of their way to talk about what in the States people describe as bullying, although judging by another kind of Korean melodrama TV series called The Glory, what they're talking about is not just what Americans think of as bullying by peers, where it's both psychological and sometimes physical violence, and that's a serious problem that needs to get addressed. There's apparently, at least thought of as a history, not only of kind of corporal punishment, but of schools, school culture, some schools being very embedded with a system of very corrupt privilege where certain kids were given license to bully, I guess, and that because of the teachers being allowed to engage in corporal punishment, and administrators too, maybe even more so, there's this perception that not only are people violent toward each other, but that it's part of a corrupt system where certain people are, usually because of wealth or connections or whatever corrupt part of the system they're upset about, allows them to commit emotional or physical violence and get away with it. I don't know if that's true, and if you really want to watch a scary, over-the-top melodrama, you can watch The Glory, which portrays this scene. There's scene where the vice principal, me in my previous life, I guess, is upset because the girl who's the primary victim, the main character, comes to him to report the bullying that she's been subjected to, which is horrific. Maybe it's real. I don't know. It seems exaggerated to me to make the kind of point. And he's angry because he's going to get into trouble if this is reported because it'll make him look bad. And so in public, with all these other office people around, he's like punching this girl down the hallway to get her out of his office. So maybe that's a version of something that used to happen here. I took it to mean an exaggeration of it. And it's all a horrible story, of course, whether it's partly true or not. And then the current version of it is because the legislature has decided that they're going to put an end to all this, some teachers, the teachers union, feel that it's swung to the point where parents can threaten to accuse teachers of allowing for this sort of thing to happen or engaging in some kind of emotional abuse. If you send the kid out of the room for not behaving, now you're engaging in school violence. And those are the sorts of accusations that this young teacher was reportedly accused of doing, those sorts of things, which a lot of people would think, well, yeah, you're a teacher, you're supposed to be able to send the kid out of the classroom or whatever. I don't know. So the teachers who were protesting are saying now parents can just threaten or accuse or put teachers in the position of having no authority, because if they do anything that makes a parent unhappy, then they'll accuse the teacher of engaging in school violence, and that's going to be playing out in the favor of the parent, and so teachers are scared. And my understanding is that there's a whole kind of complicated bureaucratic legal system, of course. This is very American, where if there's an accusation of school violence, now you have to have four administrators and a whole kind of complicated legalistic thing. And so even the threat of a parent saying, oh, well, you sent my kid out of the classroom, so now I'm going to report the school violence, and now you're going to have to go through this whole complicated legal procedure. I have no idea what the reality is, really. I'm looking at it as an outsider. And the school where I'm at, as I've said before, I think the kind of culture around this sort of question is very familiar to me. It's, as I've said, a quote unquote American school. And it has what I would describe to be very American type values about these sorts of things. So on the one hand, teachers are largely respected and have authority, but on the other hand, we're not approaching the classroom as a very authoritarian environment, and so kids are expected to be treated with respect and vice versa and all that kind of thing. So I don't see anybody punching anybody. And if there is school violence in the form of bullying or whatever, and I'm sure there is, because I have one student who talked to me about her experiences last year, it's more in the realm of what Americans are at least presumably concerned about in a normal school environment, where sometimes kids' meanness gets to the point where it really is harmful and traumatizing for other kids, and that sort of thing needs to be addressed. So anyway, that's kind of the normal life version of this story that I see. But all this drives home to me so much how these larger cultural factors affect what schools, how they function, and how people feel about how they function, and assumptions about how communities are supposed to interact. It's so much not about whether or not you're teaching biology or English literature properly. It's about these relationship and cultural things. And I've been thinking a lot about how these and other kinds of problems don't require psychologists or educational theorists. We need more anthropologists and sociologists to think through the kind of cultural norms we really think we should have in environments like schools, because the street protests here just say to me that trying to deal with a problem like school violence and corruption and a hierarchy where certain people are privileged to the extent that they can get away with things, and other people feel like they're at best going to be a victim if they can avoid victimhood. That's the ideal outcome. I mean, those kinds of social, cultural challenges in an educational environment need to be seen as social, cultural challenges and not like this is something the education ministry is supposed to fix by training the teachers with some new method of avoiding school violence. Anyway, that's my musings for this week. We'll be back in touch sometime. Thanks. Bye.